Yeah, so I'm going to begin with temperature effects on GDP. Yeah, so obviously the damages that are easiest to measure are those from warming that have already taken place because we've seen what's actually happened. Next point. And so in economics, the studies that have been most frequently used are panel data studies, right? Because you can control for time and place, both. So this is perhaps the most cited paper in climate economics on climate impacts. It's by Berksiak and Miguel, and it's now published in 2015. And what they do is they basically fit a quadratic in temperature, looking with GDP growth on the left-hand side, using a long panel of countries. And you can see here that fitting this quadratic, what they see is that it's in the hotter, as you would expect, the hotter countries, you get a negative effect on growth. As you can see, if you look down here, the global distribution of temperature observations, there's more of them on the right. And the global distribution of population has these two peaks, which is in temperate zone, and then in hotter countries where there are a lot of people, including in India and South Asia more generally. But the global distribution of GDP, of course, it's been shifting to the right, but it's still concentrated near the center. And if you look at the point estimate at the average temperature in India, it's about minus 1.7% per degree, meaning that if you get a year which is 1 degree hotter, then you see a 1.7 percentage point decline in GDP growth. Next. Yeah, so this kind of method has been used at more disaggregated spatial scales. So there's a paper in the Journal of Environmental Economics and Policy looking at a panel of Indian states from 1980 to 2015. And they find a decline in GDP growth of 2.5 percentage points per degree Celsius, which is somewhat higher than what you got from the Burke et al. Global paper. And there's another paper which I didn't mention by Del Jones and Olken, which was a little earlier than the Berksiak Miguel paper, and they had a somewhat smaller also effect of temperature. And if what you see at the global level, you also find replicated among Indian states. So at least, well, what you see at the global level in the Del Jones and Olken paper, not the Burke et al. Paper, but anyway, what you see is that they break up states in India as above median and below median in terms of GDP, and they find a larger effect in poor states. They also find a larger effect for states which are above median share of agricultural output. And then they break up this period into two, and they don't find that the effect is smaller in the second half of the period than compared to the first half. So that's basically figures from the same paper. On the left panel, the blue curve is poor states, that is the below median GDP, and rich states, and you can see that the effect at high temperatures is steeper. It's steeper. Similarly, you see less pronounced between the states which are more dependent on agriculture. And the last panel on the right, that's comparing these two periods, and you can see that there's very little difference in the pre-98 compared to the post-98 period. There's another paper that goes, that disaggregates further and that's looking using district level data. And they only have a few years, but they find a 3.2% decline in GDP growth per degree Celsius. And again, they see the same thing which the earlier paper found, which is that the effect for poorer districts is larger than for the richer districts. That is the decline in growth per degree Celsius increase. And they don't find, they look at lags also, they don't find lag effects. That is, if you take a 1 year lag, they don't find that to be significant. So, well, there's an earlier literature which looks at effects on crop yields. So there's a large literature in agronomy and the natural sciences on this. But I'm just talking about a few papers by economists, basically using the same kind of panel data methods, but looking at yields of production. And so for India, so rice is the largest crop. And this paper, they find that production is sensitive to monsoon rainfall, as you would expect. If monsoon rainfall is lower, then you get lower production. And it's also sensitive to minimum temperature late in the growing season. So if that's warmer later in the growing season, you get a decline in production. And this paper also looks at aerosols. I'll come back to that. It's important. It's not directly related to climate change, but they find that aerosols. Do I need to say what aerosols are? Well, basically, particulate matter with moisture in the atmosphere, and those are found to adversely affect rainfall. Look at wheat, which is the second largest crop. We find using a panel again that yields fall by about 5% percentage points per degree Celsius, and there's also this aerosol effect, negative effect of aerosols on wheat yields, although the mechanism here is different from the mechanism for rice. For rice, the mechanism is mediated through rainfall. For wheat, it's basically because you get less direct solar radiation in the day.